I used to think relationships were built on trust, that if you gave someone your heart, they would take care of it like it was something fragile and priceless, but the truth is people can surprise you in the worst ways when you least expect it, and I learned that lesson the hard way one night when I accidentally overheard a conversation that wasn't meant for my ears, a conversation that changed the way I saw my girlfriend, Emily Lawson, forever, because up until then I thought we were on the same page about everything. I thought she was working hard in New York to build her career like she told me, that she had turned down offers in other cities just to stay close to me, but the truth was she had been planning something behind my back, something that involved her so-called childhood friend Michael Turner, the guy she always swore was like a brother to her, the guy she swore I had no reason to be suspicious about, and yet she was willing to rearrange her whole future for him while keeping me in the dark, like I was just some side character in my own relationship. And the way I found out wasn't even dramatic, it wasn't like she sat me down and confessed, no, it was by pure chance, late at night when she thought I had already left the room, when she was on the phone whispering to one of her girlfriends about how she had already refused the New York position, how she was going to Los Angeles instead, just for a 3-month internship, just to be there with Michael, and how it didn't matter if I knew or not because she was convinced 3 months wouldn't change anything, that I would just sit here waiting for her, loyal and clueless, until she came back ready to pick up where we left off, maybe even to talk about marriage like nothing had ever happened, and hearing her words, hearing the casual way she talked about it, like my feelings didn't matter, like my trust was disposable. It was like a punch straight to the gut, and I couldn't even decide if I was more angry or more disappointed, because this wasn't just about her moving to another city for work, this was about the fact that she chose to keep me in the dark, she chose to let me believe in a lie, and at the center of it all was Michael, always Michael, the guy who always somehow showed up at the worst times, the guy who made me feel like I was constantly competing for a place in my own girlfriend's heart. And as if the universe was mocking me, just as I was still processing what I had overheard, Michael himself showed up, standing in our apartment doorway looking pale and weak like he was on the verge of collapsing, the kind of staged fragility that demanded attention, and of course Emily rushed to his side without hesitation, fussing over him, touching his forehead, asking if he needed anything, while I stood there watching, invisible in my own space, realizing that this was only the beginning of something much darker, because if she was willing to hide this from me now, what else was she capable of hiding, what else was waiting to surface in the weeks to come, and for the first time since we started dating, I felt like maybe I didn't know her at all, maybe the girl I loved wasn't the girl I thought she was, maybe I had been building my trust on quicksand, and that night as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing beside me like nothing was wrong, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything between us was about to fall apart, that this so-called 3-month internship wasn't just a harmless detour but the spark that would burn down everything we had, and deep down, even if I didn't want to admit it yet, I knew this secret was going to be the first crack in the foundation, the kind of crack that only grows bigger no matter how hard you try to ignore it, the kind of crack that eventually shatters everything. The funny thing about suspicion is that once it takes root in your mind, it grows like ivy, wrapping around every thought, choking the life out of every good memory, and that was exactly what started happening to me after that night, because even though Emily smiled like nothing had changed, even though she curled up next to me and kissed me goodnight like she always did, I couldn't unhear the things she had said. I couldn't unsee the way she ran to Michael like he was her #1 priority. And suddenly every little detail that I had ignored before started screaming at me, like how she always picked up his calls no matter what we were doing, how her eyes lit up in a way that was just a little too bright when she talked about him, how she laughed at his stupid jokes with that carefree laugh she rarely gave me anymore, and it all started adding up in ways I didn't want to admit. Because when you love someone you want to believe in them, you want to tell yourself you're overthinking, that you're being paranoid, that it's just your insecurity talking, but deep down I knew I wasn't making this up, deep down I knew there was something between them that went way beyond childhood friendship, and the universe decided to confirm it in the worst possible way, on a night that was supposed to be about me, the one day in the year where she should have put me first without question, my birthday. But instead of celebrating together like we'd planned, instead of the dinner she promised me, she ditched me halfway through the evening because Michael wasn't feeling well and needed to go to the hospital, and the way she said it, the urgency in her voice, you would think he was her boyfriend and I was just some random classmate, and I remember standing there with my half-eaten cake, staring at the empty seat across from me, wondering how the hell I ended up here. How the hell I became the guy waiting alone on his birthday while his girlfriend played nurse to another man, and I kept telling myself maybe I was being dramatic, maybe I was reading too much into it, maybe she really was just helping a friend, but then the hours passed, and she didn't call, didn't text, didn't even bother to check in on me, and when she finally came back the next morning with tired eyes and that fake explanation about how she stayed at the hospital because Michael didn't want to be alone, I couldn't even pretend to believe her anymore, because no one ditches their boyfriend's birthday for a so-called friend unless there's more to the story. No one prioritizes someone else like that unless their heart is already halfway gone, and I could see it in her face when she talked about him, the way her voice softened when she said his name, the way she brushed off my questions with irritation instead of guilt, like I was the one being unreasonable for not understanding, and in that moment something inside me shifted, something hard and cold, like a wall being built brick by brick, because I realized this wasn't just about Michael, it was about Emily too, about the choices she kept making, about the way she always seemed to put him above me, and as much as I wanted to hold on, as much as I wanted to believe in the girl I fell in love with, I couldn't ignore the truth staring me in the face, that maybe I wasn't the main character in her story anymore. Maybe I was just a supporting role she kept around for comfort, and the thought of that burned me more than I could admit, so I made a decision right then, a decision to stop being blind, to stop giving her the benefit of the doubt, to stop treating Michael like a harmless shadow, and as I blew out the single leftover candle on that cold cake the next morning, I knew this wasn't just a rough patch, this was the beginning of the end, and even if I didn't walk away yet, the cracks were too deep to be ignored, the kind that no amount of pretending could ever fix, and I could already feel the distance between us growing wider with every passing day, a distance that was only going to get worse once she left for Los Angeles. When Emily finally left for Los Angeles, I told myself I was ready, that I could handle 3 months of long distance, that I could be the kind of boyfriend who supported her career even when I didn't fully understand her choices, but the truth was the moment she stepped on that plane I already felt the gap between us widening, and it wasn't just geography, it was something deeper, something colder. Like the space she carved between us was intentional, and the proof came faster than I expected. Because within days Michael started posting pictures online, not just casual group shots or professional updates, but the kind of pictures that told a story without saying a word, her sitting beside him in cafes, her laughing while leaning too close, his arm casually draped around her shoulders like he owned the right to touch her, and the captions were vague but suggestive, little jokes only the two of them would understand, and every time I scrolled past them I felt that same punch in my chest, like the world was laughing at me for being the fool still calling her my girlfriend, and the worst part was Emily never mentioned any of it to me, she never said, "Hey, Michael's posting stupid stuff, don't take it seriously," she just let it hang there, let the rumors start, let me look like an idiot, and every call we had felt emptier than the last, her voice distant, her words rehearsed, like she was checking off a box rather than actually wanting to hear from me, and no matter how hard I tried to sound normal, I could feel myself slipping further away from her, because love can survive distance but it can't survive neglect, it can't survive dishonesty, and it damn sure can't survive betrayal dressed up as friendship, and just when I thought I was going to drown in that bitterness, life threw me a curveball in the form of Sophia Miller, my childhood friend, the girl who used to race me down the block when we were kids, the one who had moved to London years ago and was suddenly back in New York, and seeing her again was like a breath of fresh air after choking for months, because Sophia wasn't wrapped up in secrets or excuses, she wasn't hiding behind half-truths, she looked me in the eye when she talked, she listened without judgment, and she laughed with me in a way that reminded me of who I used to be before all this mess, and the timing couldn't have been more ironic, because while Emily was in another city letting another man claim space that should have been mine, Sophia was here showing me what it felt like to be genuinely seen again, what it felt like to be appreciated without strings, and it scared me how natural it felt, how easy it was to fall back into step with her, like we hadn't lost all those years in between, like maybe the universe was putting her back in my life for a reason, and I knew better than to compare them, but the contrast was impossible to ignore. Emily always making me question my worth while Sophia quietly reminded me I had value, Emily choosing Michael over me again and again while Sophia simply chose to be present, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was what real loyalty looked like, if this was what I'd been missing all along, but I also knew it wasn't that simple, because my heart was still tangled up in Emily no matter how much she hurt me, and even as Sophia's presence made me feel stronger, I couldn't shake the ache that came every time I saw another post of Emily with Michael, another reminder that she was slipping away and I was powerless to stop it. And maybe that's what hurt the most, the realization that while I was here rebuilding parts of myself I thought I'd lost, she was out there burning down everything we'd built together without a second thought, and I couldn't help but feel like we were heading toward a collision, that all of this, the pictures, the distance, the lies, even Sophia's sudden reappearance was setting the stage for something bigger, something explosive, and deep. Down I knew the next time Emily came back into my life, it wouldn't be to fix things, it would be to tear open wounds that hadn't even fully healed yet, because secrets don't stay buried forever, and rumors don't fade when the evidence is plastered online for everyone to see, they only grow, they only sharpen, and the storm that was building around us was one I wouldn't be able to ignore much longer. By the time the second month of Emily's stay in Los Angeles rolled around, the whispers had already grown into something louder than I could ignore. It wasn't just me scrolling through Michael's feed anymore, it was my friends sending me screenshots, it was coworkers pulling me aside to ask if I was okay, it was people at the gym whispering behind my back like they knew something I didn't. And every new photo he posted of him and Emily together was another crack in the foundation I was desperately trying to hold up, her sitting too close at some rooftop bar, him tagging her with captions like, "Couldn't do this without you," and what made it worse was how Emily acted like none of it existed. She'd call me late at night sounding tired, saying she missed me, but never once acknowledging the storm raging online, never once offering me the reassurance I needed. And that silence was deafening because it felt like an admission in itself, like she was letting the rumors live because denying them meant confronting the truth. And as all of that spun around me I found myself leaning on Sophia more than I ever expected, because she was there when no one else was, she was the one telling me to eat when I skipped meals, the one distracting me with stupid jokes when I couldn't sleep, and of course people noticed. Of course the same mouths that had gossiped about Emily and Michael now turned their attention to me and Sophia, calling her the rebound, the other woman, the opportunist swooping in while Emily was away. And I hated that narrative almost as much as I hated the one about Emily and Michael, because Sophia didn't deserve that. She had shown me nothing but kindness, nothing but stability, and still she became the villain in a story she didn't write. But the worst was yet to come, because when Emily finally returned to New York the air between us was already poisoned. I picked her up at the airport and the hug felt foreign, stiff, like two strangers forcing a memory of love. And I could tell from the look in her eyes that she had already judged me guilty for something I hadn't even done, because the first words out of her mouth once we were alone weren't, "I missed you," but, "So, you and Sophia seem really close," and the way she said it, sharp, accusatory, made my blood boil because she had no right to question me when she had been parading around Los Angeles with Michael like I didn't exist, but I bit my tongue at first, tried to explain that Sophia was just a friend, that she came back into my life when I needed someone. But Emily wasn't listening. She was already building her case against me, throwing every rumor she'd heard like knives at my chest, and I finally snapped. I told her I'd seen every post, every photo, that I wasn't blind, that if anyone had crossed a line it wasn't me but her, and that's when the fight exploded, voices raised, accusations flying in both directions, her saying I never trusted her, me saying she never gave me a reason to, her calling Sophia a homewrecker, me defending Sophia like my life depended on it, because deep down I knew Sophia had been the only honest piece of my world while Emily was gone, and maybe that truth cut deeper than I was willing to admit, because when Emily stormed out of my apartment that night, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled, I didn't chase her. I didn't beg her to stay like I used to, I just stood there in the silence she left behind, my chest heavy but my mind strangely clear, because for the first time I could see the cracks for what they were, not accidents, not misunderstandings, but choices, hers and mine, and even though part of me still loved her, another part of me knew we were standing on the edge of something irreversible, that the next time we tried to talk it wouldn't be about healing but about breaking, and as much as that realization hurt, I couldn't deny the flicker of relief that came with it, the sense that maybe letting go was the only way to stop drowning, but whether I was ready or not, the story wasn't finished, because Emily wasn't the type to walk away quietly, and Sophia, whether she meant to or not, had already become a permanent part of this mess, and the collision between all three of us was only just beginning. In the days after Emily stormed out, silence became our new language. She stopped calling like she used to, stopped texting me good morning or asking about my day, and when I reached out she answered with clipped replies, cold pauses, or worse, read receipts left hanging like unanswered questions, and when we finally did meet face to face it felt like I was standing across from a stranger, her eyes guarded, her arms crossed, every word between us layered with suspicion, and no matter how much I wanted to fix things I couldn't ignore the wall she had built, a wall that only seemed to grow higher with every attempt I made to climb it, and maybe it was pride, maybe it was exhaustion, but a part of me stopped trying, because love isn't supposed to feel like begging, and while Emily was busy freezing me out, Sophia was the opposite. She was warm, present, unshakable in her support. And I found myself drawn to that light like a man stumbling in the dark, not because I was looking for a replacement, but because for the first time in months I could breathe, I could laugh without wondering if it was the wrong time, I could speak without fearing my words would be twisted into something ugly, and Sophia never asked me for anything in return. She simply showed up, whether it was grabbing late-night coffee after a rough day or sitting beside me in comfortable silence when I didn't have the energy to talk. And the more time we spent together the harder it became to ignore the whispers, the looks from people who thought they knew our story, the comments on social media painting her as the reason my relationship with Emily was crumbling, and even though I defended her every chance I got, even though I swore to myself and to her that she was just my friend, I couldn't deny the shift happening inside me, the way my chest tightened when she smiled, the way I caught myself watching her longer than I should, the way her presence filled spaces Emily used to occupy, and it scared me because I didn't know if it was just comfort or something deeper, something I wasn't ready to admit, because admitting it meant acknowledging that my love for Emily had already begun to die, and I wasn't ready to let go of that piece of myself, not yet, but every time Emily pushed me further away, every time she dodged my calls or accused me of things I hadn't done, I felt that tie unraveling thread by thread, and Sophia, whether she knew it or not, was catching the pieces, holding them together in her quiet way, and maybe that's why I clung to her so much, because she didn't make me feel like I was failing, she made me feel like I was still worth something, and that contrast was impossible to ignore. It was a mirror I didn't want to look into but couldn't turn away from, because when someone makes you feel seen after months of invisibility, it's hard not to mistake that for love, and maybe it was love, or maybe it was just the relief of being understood, but either way, it was dangerous, because every time I walked away from Sophia I carried the guilt of wondering if I'd crossed a line even if I hadn't touched her, even if all I'd done was sit across from her in a diner booth at 2 a.m, laughing about memories we thought we'd forgotten, because in my heart I knew Emily and I were already breaking apart, and yet I still clung to the label of boyfriend like it was proof I hadn't failed, and that contradiction ate at me day after day, pulling me in two directions until I felt like I was being split open, because one path was a love I had fought for but could no longer recognize, and the other was a friendship that felt more honest than anything I'd known in years, and I was terrified of what that said about me, terrified of what would happen if Emily saw us together again, if she looked at me the way she had before and accused Sophia of stealing me when in reality Emily had already given me away piece by piece, and as much as I wanted to believe I was strong enough to hold everything together, I knew deep down that the choice was coming, that the story we were writing couldn't drag on much longer without a breaking point, because no matter how many nights Sophia pulled me back from the edge, no matter how many times I told myself Emily and I just needed time, the truth was simple and brutal. I was already standing in the middle of two worlds, one collapsing, the other quietly waiting to be built, and pretending otherwise was only delaying the inevitable. The weeks that followed felt like living in a slow-motion collapse, like watching a building crumble brick by brick while knowing there was nothing I could do to stop it, because Emily and I weren't even pretending anymore. The warmth was gone, the tenderness replaced by suspicion, her words sharp even when she spoke softly, her eyes searching me like I was on trial every time we met, and it didn't matter what I said, didn't matter how many times I swore that Sophia and I hadn't crossed any line. Emily didn't believe me, maybe because believing me meant admitting her own guilt, maybe because it was easier to blame me than to confront what she had done in Los Angeles, but either way the trust between us had rotted, and all that was left was a hollow shell we both kept trying to hold upright for reasons neither of us could explain, and the rumors didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. people whispering behind my back about Michael and Emily. Others hinting that Sophia and I were inseparable, like I was some character in a scandal they were all tuning in to watch, and the more I tried to ignore it the louder it got, until it felt like every step I took in New York carried an audience waiting for me to crack, and finally the breaking point came one night when Emily showed up at my apartment unannounced, her expression hard, her words laced with venom before I even opened my mouth. She threw every accusation she had bottled up straight at me, calling me a liar, calling Sophia a snake, saying I had embarrassed her in front of everyone, and I snapped right back, because I wasn't going to stand there and take it anymore. I told her about the pictures with Michael, about how she had left me alone while she laughed on rooftops with another man, about how she had let me drown while pretending nothing was wrong, and the fight that followed was uglier than anything we had ever been through, voices echoing off the walls, anger spilling out with years of love that had curdled into resentment, and in the middle of it all I realized something terrifying and liberating at the same time. We weren't fighting to fix anything, we were fighting to destroy what was left, tearing each other apart so thoroughly that there would be no going back, and maybe that's what we both wanted deep down, an ending we couldn't deny, and it came when she finally stopped screaming, when her voice cracked and her eyes filled with tears, not the soft kind but the angry ones, the kind that burn, and she looked at me like she didn't even know who I was anymore, like she was already erasing me from her story, and she said the words I'll never forget: "You already gave your heart away, Daniel, you just don't want to admit it," and then she walked out, no slamming doors this time, no dramatic exit, just silence, the kind that lingers long after someone is gone, and I didn't chase her, I didn't call her back. Because for the first time I understood that chasing her was the same as chasing a ghost, and no matter how much history we had, no matter how much love I thought would be enough, it wasn't. It had never been enough to keep her from choosing someone else, and it wasn't enough to keep me from drifting towards Sophia when everything else fell apart. And standing there in that empty room I felt both broken and strangely free, because endings hurt like hell but they also carve out space for something new, and maybe Sophia was that something new. Or maybe she was just the bridge that carried me back to myself. But either way I knew one thing: Emily and I were over, not in the dramatic maybe we'll find our way back kind of way, but in the final, permanent kind of way, the kind that leaves scars you'll trace years later but never heal from completely. And as I sat down in the quiet, phone buzzing with unanswered messages I didn't care to read, I finally let myself breathe, the weight of months of doubt lifting even as the ache in my chest deepened, because this was the price of truth. This was what it meant to stop pretending, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I was drowning. I just felt human, flawed and bleeding but still standing. And as for what came next, whether it was rebuilding myself alone or letting Sophia become something more, I didn't have the answers yet, but maybe that was okay. Maybe the point wasn't to know but to finally accept that the story with Emily was finished, and my life, messy and uncertain as it was, still had chapters left to be written.